Okay, so today we're going to make a tote bag. We're going to make a really small tote bag because it's quicker. This is going to be a tote bag for a doll. So what we want is 4 pieces of fabric, all the same size and shape. 1 long skinny bit for the straps, and we're going to do an inner pocket. So I'm not going to give dimensions because how big is a piece of string, or but what you need is you need 4 times the width of your finished strap, because you're going to fold in and fold in and then fold together. So that is going to be the width of your finished strap, and you want twice the length of it. You want to look at how wide you want your bag to be, how deep, and the width, because we're going to box the corners. So you take the width for each piece. You're going to say, I want my bag to be this long plus the depth. So we're going to plus the depth, and we're going to have it this wide plus the width, and then we add a seam allowance. So yes, so this is this is 6 inches by 6.5. So I'm going to have a depth of about 5 inches, depth of about 4.5 inches. It's going to come in each side about 1 inch, and then there's a seam allowance. So, and the same thing here, we're going to have about a finished width of about 4 inches, and we're going to come in 1 inch on either side with the seam allowance. And then you make the inner pocket something that you can, well, this is a doll's hand, but we're going to hem the top and turn in the edges. So again, you want to make your pocket a little bit bigger than you want, so maybe 1/2 inch round bigger than you actually want. So I'm going to start with the pocket. So we're going to hem it. So we're going to do a quick hem here. We're going to hem the top, just the top. This is not going to be a lined pocket, it's just going to be hemming. So can you see I'm folding it down twice? We don't need to iron or anything, we just finger press, and then we are going to do 1 line of stitching across, just a okay. Now there we go, there we have our the top of our pocket all hemmed. Lovely. Now we are going to get one of our inner pieces. Now make sure that you keep your pieces, these are rectangles, so it is important that you keep them pointing the right way. So we're going to have it wider than it's deeper for this. So we're going to put the pocket down. We want to center it exactly. We fold the pocket, put a crease, we fold the piece of fabric. You can measure, but this is a very quick way of doing it without needing to get out rulers. And you make a crease down the middle, and there you have your line, your crease line, and your crease line here, and you line them up, and allowing for a seam allowance and for the base, you can position your pocket then roughly just higher than it's lower, basically. So we line that up, and I'm going to put a pin in it just to hold it in place, and then we are going to turn in all around the edges. Turn in, turn in, turn in, and we're just going to sew around the edge. Now at the top we're going to do a back stitch because the top is going to be under some strain. So we're going to just start here. We're going to go forward a couple of stitches, we're going to go back. This just locks the top in and gives it a bit of strength. Then we're going to just sew, and as we get to the end we can turn in here. It's probably easier to do before we put it on the fabric. Note to self. But anyway, there we go. Come down to the corner, and we turn, and we put it down again, and this time I am going to fold it before I sew. And this fabric has lines, which is kind of handy to use as a gauge. Well, for a small pocket like this, you can just do it as you go. For a bigger pocket, you might want to fold it and pin it before you sew it down. And again, we're going to do a couple of back stitches here because the top of the pocket is always... Now this is for a doll, so it's not going to come under much strain, but this is how you do it, whatever size you're doing it at. So we're going to take the edges off. Now take our pin out. Lovely. So now we have our little pocket for our doll, right? So now we're going to do our strap. Like I showed you, we're going to fold it in. We're going to find the center crease down the length of it, and then we're going to fold the edges in, and this will give a nice strong strap with an even thickness all the way along. And then we're going to do the same. We're going to fold this into the middle as well, and we're going to fold it. And I'm just going to put the odd pin in here just because it's easier as I'm folding the rest of it. There we go, that's held. Now I can do the rest here. Lovely. Fold it over so that the edges meet up. Stick another pin in, and then do the middle. Now then, now we have a strap. And again, we're just going to sew all the way down this edge and then all the way down this edge, and that'll give a very neat kind of professional finish. So you need to be good at sewing near the edge and sewing not wobbly. As you're sewing, you will be adjusting. So this is a good place to remember to have your needle set to stop in the down position, so that when you stop, you can maneuver your sewing without it slipping out from under the needle. If you don't have your needle down, then it'll move and then you get jogs in your stitch line. You don't want that. So I'm taking out your pins as you go and making sure the edges are on top of each other. And you don't need to pull it, you can just guide it through. The machine does all this kind of pulling for you. So you just guide it through. If you pull, you can break a needle, you can have your stitch length uneven. So if you ever see me pulling at the back, it's because I'm also pulling at the front. I'm keeping the tension. That's what I'm doing. I'm not pulling it through the machine. I'm keeping the tension as the machine moves it. Sometimes you want to do that if you've got things that need to stay in place. Things that need to stay in place and that aren't behaving themselves. You need to, you know, show them who's boss, as it were. So now we have this strap, and as you can see, there's nice stitch lines, and that gives a professional finish. So now I'm simply going to just slice this in two. Yeah. Now, whoop. Now there we go. We got two straps. We've got one line in the side pointing up. There's another oriented the same way, and we have our outside oriented the same way. So what we're going to do is we're going to take one inside and one outside, and we are going to put the straps in. Actually, we're going to take both the outsides, not the inside. So we are going to position the straps. So remember that we're coming in a bit for the depth, so these are going to be, again, we can get our middle bit. We only have to kind of measure it on one, really, and we're going to be coming in about this much. So we're playing with this kind of space here. So we want to keep our strap straight, and we are going to place it, I'm eyeballing this, place it either side of the bag here, and we're going to, outside the middle line, we're going to pin, and we're going to pin. I want to keep these for a big headed pin, and we're going to keep these straps straight. We position that, there we go. Now, so to keep these positioned, we're just going to do a little tiny stitch line across the top of these, both of these, and then we're going to position the other straps, and I'll show you. Carry on here. Now, on a full-size bag, I wouldn't bother carrying on sewing. I'd just stop and start and stop and start. start and stop even, but it's such a short distance. Now, how do we get them exactly lining up? Well, we put this here, and we put this facing here, and we take the other strap, ta-da, and we place it, and that's how we manage to get the straps exactly opposite each other. Ooh, don't stab yourself. It's not a good look. You may put blood, sweat and tears into things, but you don't want it to show on the finished product. So now then, we do the same with this. Just a couple of stitch lines, small, just to hold it in place. Now, there we go. Now we have these. We're going to get our pocket, and we're going to put a face down, point with the open side up towards the top. We're going to put a face down here. And we get the other one, we're going to put a face down here, and we are going to sew across both of these. We are so close to finishing. We are going to box the bottoms though, so there's a bit more fiddling around. So I'm going to give a good 1/4 inch seam allowance here. And everything is sewed into place, so we just have to hold it. I'm going to leave these in place and just carry on with this. Okay, now there are different ways to get a boxed bottom. It's all different paths to the same end. One is where you cut it first, then sew it. One is where you sew it and then cut it. You sew, first of all you sew around the edge, then you cut it, then you sew. Anyway, there are different ways. We're doing a combination of the two more common ways. So some people will cut out their corners first. It's basically you're cutting a square out your corner. Some will cut them out and then sew and sew and sew. That's a lot of stopping and starting. Other people will sew all the way around and then sew the corner and then cut it off. We're not going to do neither of those. We're going to sew all the way around, then we're going to cut out our squares, and we're going to cut them out from measuring from the seam line. Now this is a very good way of getting it perfect if you are not sure that your seams are going to be equal or even, and so that's what we're going to do. Ultimately you end up with the same cut out of your fabric, the same seam, but they're just, they're different ways to skin a cat. So now we're going to sew this, and we're going to make sure that these match up here. Can you see them? We want the edges to match. So I'm going to nest them because they're all going to fold in the same way, so it doesn't matter. So I'm going to nest them because that's a very good way of getting your seams exactly right. I'm going to do still a pin. I'm going to nest the other side, and yep, make sure they nest in neatly, and then we will definitely have very professional edges to our bag. And then once these are in place, we are then going to, with the handles kept out of the way, we're going to keep the handles in. We are then going to sew, and I'm going to put a couple of clips so you can see. We are going to sew all the way around, but we are not sewing this, not here. We need this open, okay? So we're going to leave a bit, and this is the lining, we're going to leave a chunk open at the bottom of the lining. We'll sort that out later. So we are going to, with a nice 1/4 inch seam, and we're going to do a back stitch. Okay? And you just learn to eyeball where your 1/4 inch seam is. And if everything's cut right, and it should all match up very neatly. Carry on down here, make our corners match. Hurrah, hurrah. Up we go again. I'm going to do one more stitch. was a bit shy on that. There. Now, ooh, I let that go cold. Ah, nasty. Now, so we have all this going on. Now, so what we want now is we are going to measure in however wide you want your bag to be. So if you're looking for it to be a 2-inch wide bag, you're going to measure in, say, 1.5 inches on each one. If you're going to measure in 2 inches, you're going to measure in, if you're going to want it to be 2 inches, you measure in 3/4 of an inch square. If you want it to be, I'll give you the dimensions later, but anyway, cut whatever, however far it comes in, you're roughly slightly more than doubling that to get the actual finished width. Okay, so I'm going to cut in from the seam, and the reason I'm cutting in from the seam now is because the seam is very definite. If you're not sure about whether your seam allowances are even all the way up, and you cut in from the edge X amount, then if your seams are over close to the edge in one bit and in from the edge in the other, then you're going to have trouble lining up what you need to line up to sew. So I'm saying measure from your seams an even distance in, cut out a box, then we'll be laughing. So I'm going to cut out my boxes now very quickly over here. You can do it with the scissors, you can do it with a blade, draw it with a pen, however it works for you. Okay, so all 4 corners get chopped. They all get chopped the same size. And then it can be very easy to sew. Now, stay there. I'm trying to where my scissors went. I have about 7 pairs of scissors. I'm mislaid the whole lot of them right now. Well, I'm saying mislaid, I know where some of them are. I just wanted to get this done. Before everyone thought I'd forgotten about them. Now, it's 1, 2, 3, 4. Finally, right, okay. So what we're going to do is we now have this shape, right? We're now going to take each one of these corners. We are going to open them and flatten them. And you see now, because you're cutting from the seams, you have an even cut. Now we're going to nest them as close as we can. Nesting means that you fold your seams away from each other like this. Can you see that? And then where the seams are folded on the inside, they butt up against each other. You can feel them as just one single line, and then your seams will line up very beautifully. So we're now going to take this and we are going to sew If you want to pin it, pin it. We're now going to sew another 1/4 inch across here. No, okay. I'm going to do this for all 4 of them. And you can see the boxy shape, and you can see as well, because you've cut this much, but you're sewing inside, so whatever you cut, it's going to be slightly more than that it results in, and it's on both sides. So whatever you cut, it's doubled and made slightly bigger. So that's the width. Again, there's an element of I'm sure there are mathematical formulas you can do to work out using your seam allowances, etc., of exactly how much or what sizes you need to cut, but I don't have them, unfortunately. So we're nearly done here with this. I'm going to take these pins out as well. I want that pin. And the outer layers. And nest them. Just checking my seams. Yeah. And again, nest this one. Skavosh it down under the machine. There we go. Now, last little bit in. Now we've got 2 seams to do now. So we've got our bag. This is our bag, isn't it great? So I've got the hole. So we're gonna go in. Now I push it from the base. I don't pull it out. But you can see why you needed a back stitch now, because this particular little hole is in the sewing is getting quite a bit of push. So we're going to push out our corners. And if you can't get your fingers into the corners, you can always use like a crochet hook or something. And we're going to push out the other corners. Okay. And we're going to do the same with these. Go in. Now, this little bit in here that we need to close off, if we just pull it, the fabric, with a little nudging sometimes, the fabric will want to flatten to go with, like water, it wants to achieve the same level. So it will, excuse me, go, oh, come on, there we go. It will tuck itself in and fold itself down along the same lines, push all the loose threads in. You're not behaving yourself now. And now we have this that we are going to do a little top seam. Just to close that off, you can hand stitch it if you like, but top seam is just fine because most people aren't going to be neck deep in the bottom of your bag looking for open seams or neat stitching. Now, so now we have this, and it's all looking very lovely right now. We have our pocket, we have our lined bag, we have our straps. We're going to squish it all in. Oh, it's just too cute. It's too cute. And we are now going to finger press around the edge. Get rid of that loose thready. We're going to finger press all the way around the edge. Put a pin in if you want. And then we're going to do a little top seam all around the edge, just to make it all neat and tidy and lovely. So I'm going to actually turn it inside out because I might be able to. Now, want. Actually, I'm not sure why I turned it inside out. I had an idea, but I think my idea was wrong and born in the heat of the moment. Can be inside outside, makes no odds. I suppose it depends on whether you like the stitching from the top thread or the bottom thread to be sewing on the outside. I think I got confused with hemming there. Anyway, we're nearly around now. And no back stitching needed here. We'll just overlap the stitches when we get around the full way. And there we go. I'm just going to trim these with a thread ripper, seam ripper. Et voila, my little bag with my little pocket, and perfect for a baby doll.